Okay. Sure. Of course.
Hello everyone and welcome to today's Sparta. Our guest today is Giulia Bellinetti, who's head of the Nature Research Department at the Jan van Eyck Academy in Maastricht. And in that context, she's presenting today the Future Materials Bank, which is a project dealing with more sustainable art production. And we are very curious to hear more on that.
Yeah. Hi, Giulia. Thanks for being here. I'm super curious about your talk, and for everyone who's watching this online, we will post the link to the Q&A session in the video description. As usual, after the presentation there will be a 10-minute break, and yeah, with that I will give you the word.
Thank you very much, Pia and Tila. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for your interest in the Future Materials Bank. I hope everybody can see my screen, but they should. I will, before delving into the project of the Future Materials Bank, I will just say a few words about the context where I'm working, which is the Jan van Eyck Academy in Maastricht. I've recently joined the Jan van Eyck Academy as coordinator of the Nature Research Department. And the Academy is a postgraduate international residency organization, which was born in 1948. And since that moment, it's supporting artistic and, in more recent years, design practices in order to explore their connection and offer them the time and the space to develop practices of artists and designers. The commitment of the Academy since its birth was to investigate also the context and the condition of artistic practice in relation to the different moments society and the world was walking through. This made the Academy a place where practice and theory are very much entangled, and this is visible both in the artistic practices that are developing or that we are hosting, and also in the program we are developing. Today, the Jan van Eyck Academy has offers 36 residency positions, which are offered to artists, designers, individuals, duos, or collectives from all over the world. And the participants are selected upon an open call. The Academy, our organization, is supporting the practices of our residents through its lab, and we have a print and publishing lab, a material matters lab, which includes a metal workshop and a wood workshop, and the future materials lab I will describe later today. Also, we have 3 sub-institutes within the Academy, which are also supporting more research-oriented projects, and meaning, for instance, that the Art and Societies Institutes supports artists and designers who want to engage with the community of Maastricht, with the civil society and the different groups. The Nature Research Department, which I'm running, and I will say a few words about it in a few minutes, and the Education and Research Department, which is engaging more with educational institutions, universities, and educational projects. Just to frame also the context and also the trajectory where we have embraced with the Future Materials Bank, I would like just to briefly mention the new policy plan that the Jan van Eyck has adopted since 2020. Since this moment, so since few years, the Academy has decided to undertake a serious commitment towards what we consider one of the most urgent issues of today, which is the ecological crisis. In this way, we have become a post-academy in transition, in a world in transition, but also an institution in transition, because we are matching our mission of a postgraduate academy together with the commitment and the vision of exploring and critically reflecting on the present context and conditions where artistic and design practices are taking place nowadays. And by context, we refer to the ecological crisis, and by condition, we refer to the condition of inclusivity and of exclusion, which we mainly refer to or address in the within the theoretical framework of decoloniality. So this relates more to the related aspects of inclusivity and privileges, which are still very much active in today's art world. This institutional commitment, for us, it's very important to understand this institutional commitment not as an imposition, not as a thematic imposition on the artistic practices that are part of our institution or that we are inviting to Maastricht for the residency periods, but rather as a way to engage with the context where these practices are happening. And we believe that the richness and the variety and the diversity of the practices we host is a key element in order to explore what it means for art practices to thrive or to exist in times of ecological emergencies, which are the entanglements, which are the connection between artistic practices and the environmental breakdown, and how also the environmental breakdown is changing the way art and design are thought and are evolving. So the Nature Research Department, in this context, you can perhaps already imagine what the Nature Research Department is actually aiming for, and what we are doing in this department is actually offering artists, providing artists with the material and speculative tools in order to think about this relation between ecology, nature, art and design, and because we're also very much convinced that art and design can offer new ways to rethink about our relation with nature, our actually relation with the ecosystem we are part of. So we think that the practitioner in our academy are also can actually offer valuable insights and a valuable contribution in the current ecological discourse. How the Nature Research Department is supporting or is working or is assisting the practitioners in the Jan van Eyck. This is happening through both a conceptual and a practical. We are working with them both on a conceptual and practical thread of research. The conceptual thread is happening through workshop, lectures, field trips, and other kind of activities, more speculative activities. And we are also contributing, and the Nature Research Department also contributes to the general public program of the institution, which is aimed to nurture a critical insight from the art sector into the rampant ecological breakdown and to the meaning that are to the meanings of ecology and ecological breakdown in relation to artistic practices. But next to this conceptual level, we also have a more practice-oriented research thread, which is the one offered by the Future Materials Bank and the Future Materials Lab, which I'm going now to delve into. So the Future Materials Bank has been initiated in 2020, so just before the beginning of this new period of our life where we are confronted since March 2020 indeed. And it was it originated from a collaboration between the Jan van Eyck and the Central St. Martin's University of Arts in London. The aim of the Future Materials Bank is to inspire, to promote, and to support the sustainable transition for more sustainable and responsible artistic practices. The Future Materials Bank, because also of the historical moment when it was born, it evolved firstly and mainly so far online as an online archive where we collect material and material projects from makers from different parts of the world. All the materials on the Future Materials Bank are natural, circular, or otherwise sustainable, and of course non-toxic both for the humans and for the environment. At the moment, we have around 189 different materials on our online archive, which have been uploaded to the bank from makers coming from more than 80 different countries. Why material? Why we thought about, among the many different possibilities of investigating in practical terms the intersection between the ecological crisis and arts and design, we chose the material one because we believe that art and design production is deeply embedded in the material, both either in a negative or in an affirmative sense. And we also realize that there is an increasing awareness and consciousness in practitioners from the arts and design and beyond, actually, in society for the ecological impact of our action, of our practices, of our lives. But despite this increasing awareness, we notice that really undertaking a deeply sustainable transition in the practice, in the daily practices of artists and designers is a quite difficult and complex endeavor. And this is mainly for how we are seeing it. This is mainly due to different factors, among which the lack of knowledge or information, or full information about certain materials and about the material life cycle and about the material production processes, the scarcity or unavailability of places where to source alternative materials, which might offer more sustainable possibilities for practices, and the lack of time or financial possibilities. For this reason, we wanted actually to offer a possible support, help, and a tool for practitioners to investigate more sustainable alternatives in terms of materialities and material languages. And this is how we started the Future Materials Bank. And the aim of the bank is indeed both to explore material alternatives to fossil-based materials that are commonly still used, fossil-based or toxic materials, to share knowledge about these materials in order really to support a profound transition in the arts. And next to this more practical and pragmatic approach, we also wanted to foster via the bank a more mindful approach to material choices, so that practitioner can, in the moment when they choose to use a material rather than another one, they can still reflect and critically think about the implication and the meanings behind their material choices. So we also aim to work towards more mindful and responsible choices. And eventually also on another level, we aim to inspire. We are trying to inspire in order to unlock material imagination, to think about alternatives, which are also alternatives, but also other materialities, which might not be alternatives to what we're already using, but simply that are opening up new possibilities for artists and designers. And perhaps these materials, these completely new materials, or they might be also ancient materials that have been temporarily forgotten. They might be companions for practitioners in their pathway towards in their pathways beyond the fossil modernity we are living in. So this is a brief video which is showcasing few of the materials of the Future Material Bank. And now I will just walk you through these objectives, these goals, these aims we have through some example from the bank. So in terms of inviting to explore alternatives to plastic, to silicone, to resins, to epoxy, for instance, we're offering we are uploading and sharing different material projects, which might offer an interesting alternative way to proceed. This is, for instance, an example of a material called the peel sphere, which is a circular material made with fruit waste and algae. So the idea is here to offer an alternative to leather or synthetic leather. And these materials is really emerging from the intersection between design, material science, and a sustainable approach. And it's biodegradable, quite versatile and durable. And it's, of course, also offering a circular alternative. So it's also like a way to rethink about processes of consumption, life cycles of products, and how also to reduce carbon footprint deriving from the production of new materials and new products. Some of the materials, as I said, some of the materials of the bank are not necessarily new. They might also be temporarily forgotten and rediscovered by the practitioners, by the makers that have contributed to the bank. And this is one of these examples. It's a fig. It comes from a maker based in Colombia. And fig is an agave plant which has been, which is normally used to produce the textile fibers used in coffee beans bags. And the idea behind this project is actually to revive ancient practices, and also to reflect on the question of restitution, high consumption, and standardized market, and the globality of circulation of products and production. Some others, so we're now shifting from, let's say, ancient materialities towards a completely new one, a future-proof one, if we want. And this is blue elf cup. It's a dye, it's a pigment which has been developed by a maker based in UK, starting from a fungus which is very common in forest, in UK forest. And this fungi release a turquoise pigment, which can be applied through chemical and scientific processes into textile. In this way, we are escaping also traditional, highly toxic and highly chemical textile production and textile dyeing processes. Yeah, so as I said before, it's not only about finding alternatives, but it's also about fostering a different approach, a more mindfulness in our choices, more awareness about what relating with the material means and which are the implications. Some of the projects in the Future Materials Bank are working in this sense in order to invite to reflect on our current reality and offer perhaps a new insight or a new interpretation of it. And the project you are seeing here is offering, is actually making carbon emissions and carbon pollution wearable, touchable, and visible. So the carbon black, which is this pigment the maker has been developing and working with, was collecting by emptying ceramic exhaust filters from cars. And by different way of processing it, it's being used as a photographic ink, as textile dye, and also for paint. Another example, always about engaging critically with our current reality, current material reality, and current material configuration, is this recycled polystyrene project, which is offering an insight into one of the most toxic materials, of course, fossil-based materials, plastic-based materials, which is also highly toxic in the process of recycling it. In fact, when it's heated up or when it's melted, styrofoam and polystyrene are releasing very, very toxic chemical fumes. So this maker has developed a new recycling process which doesn't entail any heat or any pressure, and molds the material in many different shapes. And the most interesting thing is that this material, this new recycling process, is highly circular, as the material which is produced with it is extremely malleable and can be remolded endless times. Yes, and now I'm shifting towards the inspirational dimension of the bank. So how can we unlock material imagination, and how can we think beyond the material configuration we are acquainted with? And this is, like, for instance, an interesting project developed in Portugal, where they are using scattered fishing nets in order to develop a new object and new products. And this is another project by Spanish practitioners, who's very interesting in terms of revealing or contributing to develop fictional or historical narratives related or emerging from materialities. These are vases that have been created using clay from different layers in soil. So in this sense, they offer geological insights into the soil composition, but on top of this, the maker has also embedded artifacts or remains which she found in her soil exploration. So they are becoming also narrative objects. Yes, and another interesting project, or quite insightful, is actually this material experimentation on Japanese knotweed. Japanese knotweed is considered an invasive species, and it's normally the way it's usually processed is highly disruptive and extractive. So normally just these plants are uprooted and thrown away in landfills. And this maker has suggesting actually, she has explored also the colonial past of how this plant arrived in Western Europe. This maker is based in UK too, and so how this species has became an invasive plant here in Western Europe, the entanglements with the colonial history of Western countries, and she's offering new ways to relate in more sustainable and respectful way to deal with, let's say, the presence of this plant in our territories in more sustainable and respectful ways. And eventually, I will finish this overview of different materialities that fulfill the different purposes of the bank with the kombucha. The kombucha is microorganism, and different makers has engaged with it to produce different kind of materialities, which are particularly insightful in terms of escaping an accelerated rhythm of production, which is very much typical in art and design, in the art and design world, and to embrace, to try to foster and to embrace a culture of care. In fact, kombucha is fermenting in very long time, in relatively long time at least, and the process can't be sped up. And also when one of these materials is showcased or exhibited, it requires also some practices of care by the museum or the gallery staff, which needs to engage with it and to nurture it. So like these different purposes of the Future Materials Bank, which span from a more practical and pragmatic oriented approach of finding alternatives to the more inspirational one, which has almost philosophical intakes, if we want, are reflected also by the processes of these materials. In fact, some of the materials, as we can see here, we have on the right a material which is very easily reproducible, or it can be produced very easily at home through DIY processes, and another material on the left which requires more specific knowledges, expertise, or tools and facilities in order to be reproduced. We have both. We have both of these elements. We have sometimes even, as you can see here, this is a paper pulp. So it becomes a sculptural materiality, which can be used for different purposes. And the maker here was happy to share the full process. And if you have the time to read it on our website, you will see that it's actually very easy to reproduce. But we have also other material projects which are opening up alternatives which might be more complex to replicate at home, as this project about recycling and reusing material waste and transforming it into ceramic tiles, and also glaze for tiling. The question of opening up the recipes is actually very important to us. It's actually something that within the team of the Future Materials Bank, we reflected a lot, because our aim would be actually to work towards full openness of the platform, but we're also very much aware about the vulnerable position of some practitioners, of the efforts and the time and the energy some of them put into their projects, and which perhaps have been patented. This is, for instance, what I'm showing here. It's a circular process which is reusing orange and lemon peels in order to produce textile fibers. So we are still investigating how to navigate in this territory between protecting and supporting practitioners, and at the same time trying to foster an open approach to sharing knowledge and to build up knowledge in a collective manner. So before discussing or describing also the physical aspect of the Future Materials Bank, which is the Future Material Lab, I will just walk you through very briefly towards the website, which is futurematerialsbank.com. As I said, the materials on the Future Materials Bank have been uploaded by practitioners and makers from different disciplines, mainly anyway from the arts and the design sector and design practices, and normally indeed they can submit a material directly from a submission form which is online. Sometimes we invite, if we find some materialities or some materials which we find particularly inspiring, we invited the practitioner to submit them, but very often they are submitted just as spontaneously by the makers. Once we invite practitioner makers to double check, and the submission form also entails a number of questions that we have summed up in our material policy, which are just making sure that the material and the material process, the production process, is respecting certain criteria of sustainability and non-toxicity. For us, the material policy is also a way to reflect on what we call sustainable, what we define sustainable tomorrow. And we are very much aware that also the idea of sustainability, with all the research and all the discourse it entails, is in continuous development. So this is why also we consider the material policy an ongoing process of improvement and of refinement. And we are currently working towards the publication of an updated version of our material policy, indeed, which will be available on the website in the beginning of next year. And this upcoming material policy will entail questions like, for instance, the relation of temporality between production and consumption. So how a natural material, for instance, which is the pace of natural reproduction of a certain material in nature, for instance, a kind of wood, for instance, and the pace of consuming it. So we ask makers to critically think about the different layers, also in terms of time and in terms of pace and in terms of accelerated pace, as I mentioned before, that their practices have and their choices and their research have. We try anyway to include as many material as possible, and normally when we receive submission forms and project and material submissions, we go through a very detailed analysis of each of them. And if we have any questions, or if we have even sometimes even suggestions, we engage in conversation with the makers. So we ask questions and we try to understand if there are any components, like some glues which are still traditional glues or traditional materials, let's call them this way. We try to understand whether the maker is, for instance, undertaking some research in order to find sustainable alternatives with it. So we are really committed to be as inclusive as possible in our approach. Okay, so this here you see actually like some of the features of the website, which entails a search engine and different tags with which users and people who navigate on the Future Materials Bank can just explore specific materialities or specific properties or specific also sensorial or physical, indeed, features they're more interested into. Another aspect of the bank, another section of the bank is the lexicon, which is also like the material policy. It's also aimed to understand what we are talking about when we talk about sustainability, and as much as the future, as much as the material policy, this is also subject to ongoing update and development. So for the moment, the lexicon has been based on our personal research, on our team research, but we want to open it up to and make it become a collaborative project where we are gathering actually voices and perspective from different geographic, from different parts of the world, in order also to try to go beyond our Western-centric, our Western-oriented approach to sustainability, and also to unpack and to unveil the fact that circularity or even artificial or bio or what can be recycled have different meanings and have different impacts and entail different processes in different parts of the world. So we want actually to open up the understanding and also the discourse and the dialogue around sustainability within this lexicon. This is an example, for instance, biomaterial. The Future Materials Lab. The Future Materials Lab is because of the timings, of the hard timings we have been living in the last months, has had the possibility to grow less fast than the Future Materials Bank, than the online version of the project. In general, we ask makers who are contributing to the bank to send us a material samples, which we are collecting in the Future Materials Lab. The idea of having this sample here is actually to engage with the participants of the academy in order to explore the languages and the properties of these materials, and possibly to build up and share knowledge with the maker. So also bridging, for us, it's the aim, and what we are now focusing on is really to bridge the online and the offline dimension of this project. For this, since of course, as you can imagine, the materials are very different and they require, as I said before, different expertise, different facilities. We are trying also to develop a web of collaborations with university research centers, even farms and farmers, a civil organization, and other experts, which might help us, or which might help the participants in order to engage with these materials. One of the ways we're doing it is a new program of encounters, the Future Materials Encounters. Just yesterday, we had the first appointment, the first event, and it's indeed like it's a program aimed. It's a program of encounters, workshops, presentation, demonstrations, or other kind of activities where we invite one maker of the Future Materials Bank to the Jan van Eyck. Luckily, it was possible to do this kind of activity in a safe way, or so either to come physically to the Jan van Eyck or just to be present online, and to engage with the community of the participants to explore the language of the materials. And when I'm talking about language, I'm really referring both to the aesthetic, physical, and sensorial properties of a material, but also to the cultural histories, to the political meanings, and to the philosophical understanding that a material bear or entails. And right for this reason, to look at materials as in a way we're approaching them as boundary objects, so as objects that actually can mobilize different perspectives and also offer critical entry points into the ecological crisis. So in this way, the events combine the practice-oriented and the theoretical approach, which has identified the Jan van Eyck Academy since almost its birth. And to embrace and to reveal these different perspectives and to engage with these different perspectives, we always invite, together with the maker, another person. We invite another voice to join, to engage in a dialogue. And the voice, yesterday, for instance, the activity, the workshop yesterday was about this textile fiber, which has been developed by Rosie Broadhead. And we invited together with Rosie a microbiologist from a university in Belgium. And basically the material embeds some probiotic bacteria which enhance its property. And together with the microbiologist, we try to investigate what does it mean to engage with other species in fashion, and which realities these which realities or which possibilities or which imaginaries this might unlock when we think also about our bodies, and the clothes and the garments we wear, and the technology in relation to these multi-species and to the entanglements and to this symbiotic which can emerge. So yesterday it was a microbiologist, but for the upcoming ones we are thinking about inviting anthropologists, storytellers, other artists, historians, technology researchers, so different ones, in order really to try also to embrace a transdisciplinary approach in this series of encounters. So here I will just conclude the presentation, and I will just I will conclude it with this last image, which is a beautiful manifestation of the multi-species ecology of the Future Materials Lab, because it's a mold community which just grew on this sample of an algae textile. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Cool. Let's say since it's 2040, we meet at 2050, and looking forward to the Q&A session.
Okay, thank you.